The Professors is brought to you by Blackboarder.com. They've got everything from pro player articles, competitive prices, podcasts, Pro Tour coverage, videos, and even a point system that rewards you for just posting on the site. We've got new members joining every day, new features being added and updated, so go check out Blackboarder.com today.
Finally, they print an answer to Baneslayer Angel that gives you something to bash in with. Wait a minute.
They see me mowing my front lawn. I know they're all thinking I'm so wide and nerdy, just too wide and nerdy.
Hello everybody and welcome to yet another episode of The Professors. This week is Zendikar filled, so before we get to the last week when we cover the rest and the pre-release strategy, these are the spoilers from this week. So let's draw.
Nerdy, think I'm just too wide and nerdy. Can't you see I'm white and nerdy? Look at me, I'm white and nerdy.
As this set shapes up to have more and more money and be more and more of one of my favorite sets ever, we start off with a kick-ass white card, Luminarch Ascension. While I realize 4 turns of not dealing damage to your opponent can already mean good game, this deck tops Hoofprints of the Stag in every way, especially when dealing with the Control Mirror match and with Day of Judgment, Path to Exile, and maybe even Lapse of Certainty in the format, to slow the tempo and stop enchantment destroying spells later on, makes this stupid counterspell ridiculously efficient. Even if you do overcommit, you just pay 8 mana at the end of turn and you've got a ridiculous 5-card advantage and 16 power flyers ready to bash in with when you untap. On the note of white control, what about the spoiler from our friends at Deck Builders Radio, World Queller? While you could see this as simply an innocent blood, the card can be tuned to a multitude of different ways to fight different archetypes. Versus aggro, you can trade them a lower casting cost creature or the Queller himself for some time with Luminarch Ascension. Versus a deck that needs to play their Cruel Ultimatum, you can make them sacrifice a needed land or a Planeswalker, and against the combo deck, you can make them sacrifice their artifact or enchantment. Beyond that, this guy's a 4/4 that bashes in for 5, and in a control deck is just dandy, especially with the ability to shut him off along with the rest of the field with Day of Judgment. Lastly on white is the Step Links. Another example of something that majorly emphasizes the fetch lands and forces you to play pre-combat land, allowing your opponent to sometimes play around it and gives a reason to wait for the fetch lands for the sake of other landfall abilities, or the immediate necessity to take down a bigger creature even at instant speed with the assistance of Harrow. As for a card that represents what a mythical spell should be, which is to say not Goblin Lackey 2.0 or Mindbreak Trap, for what will be an exorbitantly high cost for 2 formats, but a card that has potential for crazy combos in the white control deck, Felidar Sovereign. While I realize this format's getting crazy fast with 1-drops like Vampire Lacerator, Goblin Guide, Scythe Tiger, and Step Links, and Day of Judgment appearing to be your only out with this Stampede, a deck based around this card with assistance from Wall of Reverence and hopefully something that can replace Plume Veil, the tempo can be slowed long enough to make this card shine. Of course, that still involves this card getting into the red zone 5 times before the win. That is, without his help. Celestial Mantle makes, with 1 swing, our Sovereign capable of dealing 7, and because of Lifelink's new static status, doubling your life from there, 1/3 of a better chance of your winning next turn. That's not to say this deck has the potency or the more legit options in the upcoming format. When paired up with decks like Sanguine Blood, still kind of fading fast, as a Doomblade ends your 12 mana investment, but hey, they made basically the same argument for Wheel of Sun and Moon and Sanity Grinding. The only things remotely notable in blue this week are Sphinx of Lost Truths as a limited bomb and I guess Archive Trap. Mill decks will begin sounding even more ridiculous when Sanity Grinding leaves the format, though this with some Tome Scours, Traumatizes, Wall of Frost, Sleeps, and Archive Traps could be notable, I suppose, if you're lucky. However, an extended Archive Trap is guaranteed to be good. Even if it does just mill 13 cards, it's still 0 mana and Sanity Grinding is still around. Therefore, with a possible defense and speed, Mill in mono blue is capable of winning on turn 3, you've just gotta solve the Rubik's Cube of your opening hand right. As for black, we've had a pretty big development since last week as Black's tribe moved from zombies to vampires, and we see the counterpart to a card I didn't bother mentioning, Devout Lightcaster, Gatekeeper of Malakar. A 2/2 for black isn't so hot, but when you add the Cruel Edict on the 2/2 for black for 3, in what we expect to be a mono black deck, it seems just dandy to me, especially expecting the Vampire synergy. Also in the black 3-drop slot is Vampire Nighthawk. This guy, while below what we've come to expect for 3 mana these days with Kitchen Finks, Rock's War Monks, Woolly Thoctars, Fueling Lords, the card reminds me of Tidehollow Strix. Comparatively, for 1 more mana in a single color, you get a +2 toughness upgrade and lifelink. This is plenty fine and can prepare you as a routine soldier in your army of vampires if black has a reliable vampire lord, something that seems unlikely in the set at this point, but nonetheless possible and welcomed. But wait. Stepping back to M10, we see a vampire that, surprisingly enough, is ready, willing, and able to support the creatures of the night. While Vampire Nocturnus isn't exactly a lord, he gives a boost that could easily allow you to win the game on turn 5, and acted as a harbinger for a tribe that exists in a certain color, corresponding to what I had said would happen, just, with a different card. In red, after skipping Goblin God last week after misreading the card as, your opponent reveals the top card of their library. If it's a land, they put it into play, and was like, well, it's okay, but you're gonna ramp them at least 2 times before the damage makes enough of a difference. Turns out they just put it into their hand. Scythe Tiger? Who cares? This little guy is 6 to 8 damage easy, and Goblin Chieftain plus Warren Instigator plus Elemental Appeal plus Lightning Bolt just made red the most ridiculous deck in the format. The blue decks are too slow, even Wall of Frost just stops a single Elemental Appeal token. The counter spells have to wait till turn 3 to be effective when you've already dropped 2 key creatures and then get free ones off this little dude. The white deck can never ever get to Baneslayer Angel, and Day of Judgment is upset by a single goblin bashing in again. This card, in limited when you've got half a land deck, is actually a turn 4 or 5 play. At that point, the removal spells tend to be spent by now, and this card goes fine with a second casting on the turn. It works the same way in Constructed with the exception of against the control decks, especially when these little bugs can win it by themselves with enough beats. It's pretty much the slower version of Wild Mikado or Curdape, and while it won't be showing up in Zoo, pick up a playset of these guys today. I'm marking them as the sleeper card, especially for a green-black or a green-red ramp deck. While they are selling for $6, I still say they're worth it. Moving to the colorless cards, Blade of the Blood Chief is cheaply costed enough to be played in the Vampire Tribal deck, and has a certain reusability and card advantage capability at a low cost that giving to a Vampire Lacerator at turn 2 and Doomblading turn 3, +2/+2 is pretty crazy and pushes for the win. Eternity Vessel reminds me of Lich's Mirror, except it's a lower rarity, and better. A lot better. In the Sanguine Tribute deck, if you're knocked to half your life, then flip out the land, it's good game. This deck is getting more and more potential, and I'll be sure to detail how it does, and I'm positive this will be welcome come Zendikar. As for Carnage Altar, this will be around for limited and is comparable to Thopter Foundry and is even better for the sake of card advantage. It's not guaranteed to get a creature, but of course it's a-okay in this mega land set. Speaking of lands, before we see a standalone land, you've got to note this set of ally-colored uncommon lands Mark Rosewater said would be coming up. Obviously, they've got to have a drawback, and we know that they're not fetch lands because they do tap for the 2 allied colors. We also know they all have the same ability based on the amount of text and the parts of the text read out. We also know this one has the word "the", including a space between the second and the third line in the drawback. My guess? With so many cycles of lands in the format, 5-color Magic has also become not just a possibility for the future standard format, but likelihood. 4-color control is plenty easy with the shard lands, fetches, duels, and perhaps even Terramorphic Expanse, Unstable Frontier, or Exotic Orchard. And 5-color will be stretching the limits. As for the last card of the week, we see the new Cabal Coffers, Crypt of Agadine. A plenty fair card that gives a Dark Ritual back to black in the later game, but acts correctly in mono-black aggro vampire deck, and shifts towards a mono-black control strategy. So until next week when we detail all the allies and the rest of the spoilers, this is Anthony Palmario. Tapped out for now, but we'll untap soon.
White and nerdy, I'm just too white and nerdy. Look at me, I'm white